Welcome back. Let's get right into today's top global news. We'll start with the conflict in Ukraine. Things have taken a pretty unexpected turn there.
Yeah, there are reports coming in about North Korean troops actually fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine's Kursk region.
Wow, that's a major development. Remember back in October, the initial reports said those North Korean troops were just being sent to reinforce Russia. Now it looks like they're actively engaged in the conflict.
Right. Ukrainian intelligence is saying there are at least 30 North Korean casualties so far. And President Zelensky, he actually released drone footage. It seems to show North Korean troops on the ground. There's separate footage, too. It shows Russian troops, and they appear to be trying to burn the faces of deceased North Korean soldiers.
It's a complicated situation for sure. The U.S. has confirmed both the involvement and the casualties of North Korean troops, but Russia, well, they haven't said anything yet. This needs to be watched closely. It could have a big impact, on the whole geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting gears now. There was a horrible incident at Abundant Life Christian School in Wisconsin.
A 15-year-old student, Natalie Rupnow, opened fire there. She killed a teacher and another student, and 6 more people were injured. Then, tragically, she took her own life.
It's a really disturbing situation, especially since the school actually had active shooter training earlier this year. The police are still investigating, trying to figure out what might have motivated her.
Let's turn our attention to the Indian Ocean now. Cyclone Chido has hit Mayotte, and the damage is extensive.
This cyclone is the strongest to hit that island in 90 years. The winds were over 140 miles per hour. Settlements are flattened, and the infrastructure has been severely impacted.
Things are really bad there. There are shortages of everything: food, water, and shelter.
Okay.
And the damage is making rescue and aid efforts difficult.
The early estimates are grim. The death toll could reach the thousands. That's a really heartbreaking number. Mayotte depends heavily on French aid, and this disaster is just going to make things even more challenging for them.
Now let's move to the Middle East. The conflict between Israel and Hamas is escalating, and there are reports of more casualties in Gaza.
Israeli strikes have killed more than 50 people in Gaza, according to reports. Their targets were sites linked to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Some of these sites were UN-run schools that were being used as shelters.
This is another tragic development. It just adds to the already heavy toll from this conflict. More than 45,000 people have died. It's a really stark reminder of the human cost of this war.
Back in the U.S., we have the popular social media app TikTok. Its future is still unclear, and there's a deadline coming up on January 19th. There could be a ban or a sale.
President-elect Donald Trump is scheduled to meet with TikTok's CEO, Shou Zichu, to talk about the app's future.
The proposed ban is all about concerns about TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. There are alleged links to the Chinese government.
TikTok has filed an emergency application with the Supreme Court. They're trying to delay the ban. It's interesting, though. Trump used to support the ban, but now he opposes it. You have to wonder if his popularity on the platform might be influencing his change of position.
Absolutely. What happens at this meeting? It could have big consequences. We're talking about the tech industry, international relations, and even domestic politics here.
Let's shift our focus to Syria now. The Assad regime fell recently, and the country is in a period of significant transition and uncertainty.
Right. We're seeing a mix of things there. Hope and fear as Syria tries to figure out what comes next. In Latakia, the Alawite heartland, there's a lot of anxiety.
The Alawites are a religious minority who mainly supported the Assad regime. Now they're worried about reprisals. The new ruling power is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and while they've said they'll protect all religious groups, there's still a sense of fear.
Right. And there are reports about property seizures and violence targeting Alawites in Latakia. It's definitely adding to their worries. Meanwhile, the notorious Saidnaya prison has been opened. It was a symbol of the Assad regime's brutality. Now that it's open, we're seeing the full extent of the horrors that happened there.
Volunteers are trying to document the prison's records. They want to give answers to families of people who disappeared there. The conditions in the prison, the scale of the atrocities, it all shows how incredibly difficult rebuilding and healing will be in Syria.
Yeah, it's a really stark reminder, post-conflict societies, the scars they carry, the work that needs to be done. Speaking of complex situations, Angolan businesswoman Isabel dos Santos is speaking out against the UK's sanctions.
Dos Santos. She's the daughter of Angola's former president. She was considered the richest woman in Africa. Now she's facing some serious restrictions, an asset freeze, and a travel ban from the UK government. They're accusing her of taking millions, siphoning them right out of the Angolan economy.
This is part of a bigger trend in the UK. They're cracking down on what they call dirty money. Dos Santos, though, says she's innocent, She says no court has found her guilty of anything.
She's claiming it's all political, meant to damage her reputation.
Dos Santos built a huge business empire in Angola. We're talking telecommunications, banking, even the state-owned oil company Sonangol. When her father left office, she was removed from Sonangol, and they froze her assets.
Right now, she can't get dividends from her companies, and she can't even go back to Angola. She could be arrested if she does.
This whole legal battle, it shows just how intertwined business, politics, and international finance really are. Okay, let's shift gears again. There was a strong earthquake near Port Vila, the capital of Vanuatu. There was significant damage, and there were even tsunami warnings.
The earthquake was a magnitude 7.3. Thankfully, the tsunami threat is over, but they're still figuring out the impact of the quake.
Some buildings have collapsed, and there are reports of damage to the infrastructure. Rescue teams are on the ground, working hard. We'll have to wait and see about the full extent of the damage and if there were any casualties.
This just reminds us how vulnerable island nations like Vanuatu are to natural disasters. On a different note, Iran has decided to hold off on implementing that controversial new dress code law.
The law was supposed to go into effect this week. It had harsher penalties for women and girls who don't follow strict Islamic dress codes, like covering their hair.
There's been a lot of criticism, both inside and outside of Iran.
A lot of people saw it as a step back for women's rights in Iran. President Masoud Pezeshkian, he was elected on a platform of greater personal freedom. He called the law ambiguous.
It's a reflection of what's going on in Iran. The tension between conservative forces and reformist forces, both within the government and in society as a whole. Shifting back to the U.S., Carlos Watson, the former MSNBC host and founder of Ozy Media, has been sentenced to almost 10 years in prison for fraud.
What a fall from grace. He was considered a rising star in the media world.
Prosecutors said he basically orchestrated a scheme. He wanted to trick investors into thinking Ozy Media was doing much better than it was. Investors lost millions.
Yeah, he allegedly faked information. Ozzy's finances, their relationships with celebrities, all made up to lure investors.
And then the whole thing blew up when the New York Times investigated. They found out one of his executives pretended to be a YouTube rep during a call with potential investors.
This case is a big reminder. Even in the super fast-paced world of media and tech, integrity and transparency are still the most important things. Over in South Korea, the country's constitutional court has started the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk Yeol.
Yoon declared martial law in response to all the protests calling for his resignation. Now he's been suspended from office.
This impeachment trial is a huge turning point for South Korean politics. The court has 6 months. They have to decide. Remove him from office permanently or reinstate him.
And the ruling People Power Party, they're having their own problems. Their leader resigned, facing pressure to take responsibility for what's happening.
This whole impeachment process is showing how divided South Korea really is, politically speaking. Now, for something a little lighter, 7 tourists ended up in the hospital after having pina coladas at a 5-star resort in Fiji.
They think the cocktails might have been contaminated somehow.
This reminds me of what happened in Laos a few weeks ago. 6 tourists died there. They suspected methanol poisoning from contaminated drinks.
These cases really highlight how important it is to be cautious about food and drink, especially when you're traveling in another country.
It also points to the need for stricter regulations in the tourism industry. We have to make sure travelers are safe. Meanwhile, 2 Russian oil tankers were destroyed in the Kerch Strait. There's been an oil spill, and at least 1 crew member is reported dead.
The Kerch Strait separates Russia from Crimea. It's a critical route for their exports, especially grain and oil.
This incident raises some big concerns. Maritime safety, the potential environmental damage from the spill. This is a sensitive area.
They'll definitely need a thorough investigation to find out what caused the wrecks and how bad the damage really is. Okay, let's move on to Georgia. The political crisis there has gotten worse with Mikhail Kavalishvili's appointment as president.
Kavalishvili. He's a former football player, played for Manchester City. He was appointed by the parliament, but it's a disputed parliament.
Opposition groups are boycotting the parliament. They're saying the recent elections were rigged. They're outraged by this appointment.
There are still protests going on. They want new elections. They're accusing the ruling Georgian Dream Party of basically trying to dismantle democracy.
It's a volatile situation. There's worry about democratic backsliding, about basic rights being eroded. There are even reports of police brutality and attacks on journalists and activists.
Georgia is at a real crossroads. They want closer ties with Europe, but the current government is a big obstacle. The world is watching closely. This crisis could have a huge impact on Georgia's future.
Let's switch gears to the entertainment world. Actress Taboo is getting a lot of attention for her role in the latest episode of Dune: Prophecy.
It's a sci-fi series, based on Frank Herbert's novels. It's been getting a lot of buzz, especially for its female-centric storylines and all the strong female characters, both on-screen and off.
People in India are really proud of Taboo and her role in the series.
It fits into a bigger trend we're seeing globally in film and TV. Women are taking center stage, and it's great to see.
It's a welcome change, challenging those traditional gender roles, showcasing the talent and diversity of women in entertainment.
Taboo herself has talked about it. She's noticed all these female-led projects in Hollywood and Bollywood.
She sees it as a sign of progress, a sign of empowerment for women in the industry.
Back to Syria for a moment. The shadow of the Assad regime is still there, especially when it comes to the horrors of that Saidnaya prison.
Jeremy Bowen, a veteran BBC journalist, he's covered conflicts all over the world. He visited Saidnaya recently, and he called it the worst prison he's ever seen.
It's hard to hear about the torture, the terrible conditions, the sheer number of people who suffered there. It's truly disturbing.
It's a chilling reminder of how brutal the Assad regime was and the long-lasting impact on the Syrian people. Let's turn to Latin America now. Argentina has a new president, Javier Milei, and he's making headlines with his radical economic reforms. He's even having an unexpected influence on U.S. politics.
Miley's a libertarian. He wants to slash government spending, get rid of regulations, the whole package. Both President-elect Donald Trump and Elon Musk have taken notice.
Musk is expected to have a big role in the Trump administration. He's a fan of Milei's approach. He thinks it could work in the U.S.
Some analysts, though, are saying, hold on, they're saying you can't really compare Argentina and the U.S. Their economies are very different.
It'll be interesting to see what happens, how Milei's policies work out in Argentina, and whether his brand of libertarianism gains traction in the U.S. There's a disturbing story we need to talk about. The online reaction to the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is raising some red flags. It's making people worry about how violence is glorified on social media.
Yeah, the suspect in this case, Luigi Mangione, he's got a big online following now. Some people are actually praising him for what he did, even though it was a murder.
Mangione is young and, well, some people think he's good-looking. Combine that with the widespread anger towards the U.S. healthcare system, and you have this strange mix of hero worship and vigilante justice online.
It's a trend, and it's disturbing. A murder suspect is turned into some kind of folk hero online. It makes you think about how social media shapes public opinion, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows how these platforms can be used to make violence seem okay, to make extreme views seem normal. It really distorts people's sense of right and wrong.
This case really shows the deep divisions in American society. People are frustrated. They want real change, meaningful reforms to fix the systemic problems fueling this anger. We need to talk about these issues. In other news, there have been a bunch of mysterious drone sightings, New Jersey and some other states. People are concerned.
These drones have been seen near some sensitive areas. Military facilities, President-elect Trump's golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey.
The authorities are investigating, but so far, no concrete answers. They're saying there's no evidence of a threat to national security.
But people are speculating, and there's definitely anxiety. Some are even saying it could be a foreign government.
Lawmakers aren't happy. They want more transparency, a quick resolution to this whole unsettling situation. This whole thing, it really highlights how security threats are changing, and we're still figuring out how to deal with new technologies that can be used in ways we don't anticipate.
You know, speaking of unpredictable, let's go back to that online reaction to the murder of Brian Thompson, the healthcare CEO. It's a story that really makes you think about the line between the online world and real life. It's getting blurry. Here you have this suspect, Luigi Mangione, and people are praising him online even though he's accused of a terrible crime.
It's a disturbing trend, no doubt. Mangione is young, and some find him attractive. It's created this weird situation online where he's almost admired. Some people are even donating to his legal defense fund.
There's no question that people are angry about the healthcare industry in this country. They see it as putting profits before patients, and that anger is coming out in this case, even if it's misplaced.
I get it, I do. But it's still worrying to see how this case has been distorted online. A murder suspect is being portrayed as some kind of hero. It raises important questions about how social media influences what people believe.
It does. It shows how these platforms can be used to glorify violence, to make extreme views seem normal. It's a real threat to our sense of right and wrong.
It's a good reminder that we need to think critically, to be responsible for what we do and say online, especially when it comes to sensitive topics like violence and crime. We need to be aware of echo chambers and how easy it is to forget the humanity of others, both victims and perpetrators.
That's a great point. And it's so important to remember that behind every headline are real people, real families whose lives are affected by these events. It's something we should always keep in mind as we try to make sense of this complicated world. Well, that wraps up our global news roundup for today. We've covered a lot of ground, from fascinating developments to some truly challenging events.
It certainly has been a wide-ranging conversation. It reminds us that it's more important than ever to stay informed, to be engaged, and to be discerning in how we consume news and information. The world is complex, open dialogue, the willingness to consider different points of view, that's crucial if we're going to navigate these times.
Couldn't agree more. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.